So let's get into the demonstration scenario a little bit. And if you remember from the previous slide, the way that most of these logs are accessed is through the AADRM PowerShell module. Now in our scenario, you are an administrator at Contoso Limited, and you have some concerns about the super user group, what's been going on with that group. In a previous module where we discussed controlling access to Azure Information Protection, we talked about the super user role and how important it is. And so you might have concerns about when that feature is enabled, disabled, and anything else that's done with that super user feature. So how can you look at logs to figure out what's going with that? The other concern that has come up is Marisol Garber is an employee that was part of the Life Settlements Group. The Life Settlements Group was divested and Marisol is no longer an employee of the company, and there might be some concerns about some things she did prior to leaving. So you're going to want to check into that as well. So how do we do that? Well, in the first case, anything going on with the super user's role would appear in the Azure RMS admin log. So we're going to use the PowerShell module to access those logs and search for anything dealing with the super users. For Marisol Garber, any actions she would have taken would have shown up in the Azure RMS user logs. And so we want to download all of those logs within a certain time frame and search for anything where Marisol Garber was doing something with her account. So let's flip over to Visual Studio Code and run through these two scenarios. Okay, here we are in Visual Studio Code. As you can see, I've got a file open called AIP Actions, and this is located in the Module 6 folder of the scripts. If you're looking for the scripts, you can always find them on my GitHub. It's in the Azure Information Protection repository, and each module has its own folder. I've already taken the liberty of running the get credential and connecting to the Azure RMS service, so we don't have to run through that. The first thing we can do is look at the current configuration of Azure RMS. And the main thing to note here is that the document tracking feature state is enabled. So document tracking is turned on for the service. If we scroll down a little bit, if we want to get all the commands that deal with logs, we're going to run get command, look for log in the command, and scope that down to just the module AADRM because you're going to find log commands in a lot of modules. So we'll go ahead and run that. And so here's all the different commands that deal with logs in Azure RMS. Next thing we're going to do is let's create a directory for user logs. I'm just going to set the path to c:/AIP user logs. Go ahead and run that and make the directory. Alright, the directory has been created. Now if you don't have log parser already installed and you use Chocolatey for your package management, you can just run this command in an elevated shell to install log parser. It doesn't add log parser to the path variable, so you'll have to go into the log parser directory to run the executable, or alternatively, update your path variable. Now let's go ahead and get user logs. So I'm going to get the user logs. I want to dump all of the log files into the user log directory. And I'm going to use the from date. I'm going to do a little PowerShell magic here. I'm going to get the current date and I'm going to add -30 days to that. So I'm basically saying I want to get all the logs from 30 days ago on. Let's go ahead and run that command. And remember, these logs are stored in Azure Blob Storage, so it's pulling all these different logs and dumping them into that directory. The next thing we're going to do is use log parser to take all these different log files and convert them to a single CSV file that we can search. So like I said, I'm going to have to go into the log parser directory to run log parser. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now we're in the log parser directory. We're going to run this command. Log parser is a very powerful tool and it has a lot of commands. To break down this one a little bit, we're running log parser, we're passing a -i and telling it what format the input files are going to be in. The W3C format is what they're in. And we want to output to a CSV format. And then we have a sort of SQL statement. We're selecting everything. We want to dump into a file called aiplogs.csv, and we're getting all this information from any file that ends in .log in the same directory. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to go ahead and run this. Now that we have a CSV file, we can go ahead and import that CSV into a variable that we can manipulate with PowerShell. So I'm running import CSV and passing it the CSV file that was just created. And now we're going to parse through all of those results. We're looking for a field called user ID in the CSV, and looking for anywhere it has a value that's like MA Garber. Anywhere that her user ID shows up, we're interested in that log entry, and we're going to format it as a table. So we produced a lot of records here. Let's scroll up a little bit, we can see it tells me what's the log file name that this originally came from, the row number, the date, the time, all that kind of good stuff. The important thing here is that you have stuff like request type. So what type of request did Garber do? So now you could take this information, hand it over to your security team, and let them do whatever they need to do with that information, and especially if they think that Marisol did anything before she left. Now let's get into the admin logs. So I'm going to create a separate directory for the admin logs and put it in C AIP admin logs. Go ahead and run that. Okay, we've created that directory. And as I mentioned before, the get admin log command, that doesn't output a whole bunch of log files. It's a single log file. And if you don't pass it any kind of dates, it just gives you everything that's in the admin log. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the whole thing and put it in a file called adminlogs.log. And that can take a few moments depending on how big your admin log is. Now the admin log is in a CSV type format. It's not perfect. It doesn't have any headers, so you do have to tell it what the headers are. And so in order to do that, I am doing the import CSV command, and I am passing it the headers that exist. I'm telling it the path of the file that I want to import, and I have to tell it what delimiter is being used. In this case, it's a tab delimited file. So I'll go ahead and run that. Okay, now that we have that loaded into the results variable, we can now run a where query. And so we're looking in the action column, and we're looking for anything that has the super user value in it. So these are all the log entries where the action had something to do with the super user group. And in a previous module, we removed Marisol from the super user group. So you can see there's a record in there saying that that action was completed. And we also set a new group to have the super user role. And you can see that that entry is in there as well. So once again, you could take this information, export it out to a file and give it to your security team or whoever else might need this information. You could also set up some sort of script or stream to get these log files on a regular basis and then load them into a SIM or whatever your security team would like to use.